morning. I'm Campbell with the USDA APHIS, and the local office that I'm in covers the state of Washington and also the state of Alaska. Yeah, today I'm going to talk about the Plant Protection Act Section 7721 and how it relates to funding opportunities. And all these slides except one will have content that's taken directly out of the USDA APHIS website having to do with the Plant Protection Act. So the information is findable there too. But as it says here, the USDA APHIS provides funding for the Plant Pest and Disease Management and Disaster Prevention Program, which has a very long acronym, and also the National Clean Plant Network under the authority of the Plant Protection Act, Section 7721. And I'll mostly be talking about the first part having to do with the plant pests and diseases. The National Clean Plant Network, in a large sense, is made up of facilities that do work on pest-related things, and there happens to be a facility that WSU has over in Prosser that pertains to that. So next slide, please. Okay. And for fiscal 2023, the money that is available and is in the process of being awarded now is as follows. There's approximately $70 million within the Plant Protection Act Section 7721. And the biggest share of it goes toward, as it says, pest detection, surveillance, and identification, threat mitigation, safeguarding nursery production, and responding to plant pest emergencies. And then at the bottom of that slide, it shows the entities that are able to pursue this kind of funding: universities, states, federal agencies, NGOs, nonprofits, tribal organizations, and it says that virtually all of the country is involved. Next slide. Okay, and out of that 70 million, as you see highlighted there in yellow, about 63 million is funding approximately 322 projects having to do with the plant pests and diseases. And then it says further on that about 13 million of that 63 million or so is also kind of earmarked for any rapid responses that might be needed. And then about 7.75 million is going to the National Clean Plant Network. Next slide. And some of the projects that are being funded this year include the following. The Northern Giant Hornet is receiving about $1 million here in the state of Washington. An insect called the box tree moth is also being funded at about $1 million. Stone fruit and orchard protection, about 1.2 million in 11 states. Forest pests, another 1.1 million for various things, usually things along the lines of trapping and, as it says, methods development and so on. The next bullet point, sudden oak death, which is a program that's been ongoing for 20 plus years now. There's about 600-some thousand across 15 states for surveys and other things regarding that particular plant disease. And then the last listing here, and again, these are just some of the project areas, has to do with solanaceous plants, including tomatoes, and a little over $250,000 there for that kind of work. We can go to the next slide, please. The Plant Protection Act Section 7721 is organized into 6 goal areas. And again, this is mostly going to pertain to, plant pest and disease work. And Goal 1 is actually broken up into 2 areas. There's Goal 1A and Goal 1S. Goal 1A has to do with analyses. Goal 1S has to do with surveys. Goal 2 has to do with domestic inspections. Goal 3 has to do with increasing the ability to identify pests and related things. Goal 4 has to do with safeguarding nursery production. Goal 5 is for outreach and education. And Goal 6 is enhancing mitigation and rapid response. And this is often seen in the form of, being able to do something about a pest. And I'll mention that most of the emphasis here will be on exotic pests that are, new to the United States or of concern as far as entering the United States. A lot of survey work is done to, look for things that, so far as we know, are not here yet. Okay, next slide, please. And this has to do with goal 1, which I mentioned is broken up into 2 parts. And the first part has to do with analyses. A good way to think of this is pathways, looking at how pests get in, or sometimes things that have changed that allow pests to get in. And so that's the best way to think of that part. Goal 1S has to do basically with standard and traditional surveys, trapping, visual inspections in fields and crops, and so on. Next slide, please. Goal 2, the example that's often used and shown in this graphic, has to do with canine detector dogs and so on that are used in different kinds of situations to do either inspections upon arrival or otherwise. So this particular area I don't think has had quite as many projects in it, so I'm a little less familiar with some of the work that's done in this particular area. We can go on to the next slide, please. Goal 3 has to do with pest identification and detection technology, and a couple good examples of local interest. Here in the state of Washington, the State Department of Agriculture has gotten funding for a number of years to allow it to do some specialization with regard to identifying exotic and other pest moths that can show up. A lot of trapping is done for moths and so on, because of course the caterpillars are significant agricultural pests in many cases. And similarly in Oregon, there's been funding through this source available for a number of years to have an emphasis on beetle identification, given that beetles as a group are also significant pests that need lots of identification resources. Next slide, please. Goal 4 has to do with safeguarding nursery production, and this can take any number of forms. Sometimes I've seen examples where nonprofits are able to pull together interested parties to work on projects that will, improve best management practices and other things that will bring about essentially healthier plants for, not only planting but also trade. And then other aspects that I've seen have to do with, even things like soil steaming in nurseries to deal with the earlier mentioned Phytophthora ramorum pathogen. So there's any number of things that can take place under this particular goal. We can go on to the next slide, please. Goal number 5 gets a lot of use. It has to do with targeted outreach and education. Dan Fagerly has certainly operated in this particular area, and many others as well. And this has been a very valuable area, of course, to get out information on emerging pests and changes with regard to the pest complex and the kinds of things that we should all be looking for. Next slide, please. And goal 6 has to do with enhancing mitigation capabilities. And again, as I mentioned, it has a lot to do with responding to pest situations. And as it says here in the graphic, it can involve pest management tools, reducing adverse effects, and minimizing the spread of detected plant pests, which translated is sometimes, taking the necessary actions to eradicate a pest or similar. And so there's a lot of interest and utilization of this particular goal. Next slide, please. Again, looking at this current fiscal year, 2023, by goal area, what you'll see here is the the goals 1 through 6, and on a national level, it shows essentially what the funding was through the Plant Protection Act, Section 7721. And what you'll notice is that Goal 1S, having to do with surveys, is a highly funded area. It's shown there at about $14 million. And then Goal 6 is also a highly funded area. Again, $13+ million there. And I think traditionally what I've seen over the years is those particular areas get a lot of proposals, or as the term is used in the process, suggestions for funding. And so that has a lot to do with why those particular areas get a lot of the $69+ million and so on. And so it varies a little bit from year to year, but as you can see, some areas get simply more funding than others. And some of that's a function of how many suggestions or proposals are offered up, I'm sure. Okay, next slide, please.
Clinton, you have about 3 minutes left.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
What we see here is, again, fiscal 2023, and this is the portion that was broken out. You can find all this information online, but this shows what was pertaining to funding for projects submitted by tribal nations. And you see that Wisconsin is represented a few places there, as is Idaho, and different kinds of projects and so on. You'll see that some is survey work, and it's virtually all survey work except for one of the items shown there. Next slide, please. And over the last 10 years or so, this is just a collection of what I've gone through and found for Washington and Alaska, given that this office covers those 2 states. And this shows you the suggestions or proposals that have come in from those 2 states from tribal entities having to do with looking for funding from this particular Section 7721. And some of these suggestions or proposals have been funded, and some of them have not. And one of them there, the very first one shown, was funded for multiple years. So again, there's all these different goal areas and areas of interest, and so this is where depending on the kind of work that's looking to be done, the different goal areas can be looked into when it comes time to submit a suggestion or a proposal. And again, on the website, if you just type in USDA EPA 7721 to do an internet search, you'll come up with this particular graphic and more having to do with how to find out more information. One of the things I'd call your attention to there in the graphic itself on the top right has to do with what's called the stakeholder registry. And this is something you can sign up for, and you'll get periodic messages from USDA talking about things that are up and coming, including when it's time to put in a suggestion or a proposal for Plant Protection Act 7721 funding if you're interested. And so that's one way to find out about it, or certainly you can contact me through any of the organizers of this session, and we can get you set up. So that's it. I have one more slide if there's questions, probably for later.